the email link on the showcase homepage, and we'll do our best to address it in the time we have. If we don't get to your question, we'll be sure to follow up after the event. With that, let's get into some questions. John, again, thank you so much for joining us. We've got a lot to cover. So maybe if we could start off with, you can give a brief introduction and then take a couple minutes to give us an overview of T2 Biosystems.
Sounds great, Trip. I'm John Spurzl, the Chairman and CEO of T2 Biosystems. We are a commercial stage molecular diagnostic company and a leader in the rapid detection of sepsis-causing pathogens and antibiotic resistance genes. Our mission is to fundamentally change the way medicine is practiced through transformative, culture-independent diagnostics that improve the lives of patients around the world. We have a patented technology platform based on magnetic resonance detection. We're applying that to sepsis, Lyme disease, and bioterrorism. We believe these three areas collectively represent a multi-billion-dollar market opportunity. In each case, sepsis, Lyme disease, and bioterrorism, rapid detection and targeted treatment are essential for improved patient outcomes.
Thanks, John. Now, if you could please tell us a little bit more about how your T2 magnetic resonance technology works and how it differs from some of the other molecular platforms out in the market today.
Well, T2MR, as we call it, is a patented detection method utilizing miniaturized magnetic resonance technology that measures how water molecules react in the presence of magnetic fields. This technology, along with our patented sample handling and processing technology, has allowed us to be the first and only company to receive FDA clearance for direct from blood detection of sepsis-causing pathogens. Most molecular diagnostics use fluorescence detection, which can be impacted by sample matrix and thus may require DNA purification. T2MR is agnostic to background, which allows us to use crude lysates for detection. And that's our main advantage.
Wow. That's really interesting. And so that main advantage, translates to some significant benefits that the T2 instrument, the T2DX instrument has in your panels. So why are, those advantages of the technology so important with sepsis, and how does this translate to potentially improve patient outcomes?
Our main competitive advantage from a marketing and sales perspective is our ability to detect certain sepsis-causing pathogens directly from blood in just 3 to 5 hours without the need to wait days for a positive blood culture. There are no other FDA-cleared products able to do this. Many firms have tried and failed, and we're literally standing alone, which is a testament to both our scientific and our regulatory expertise. When it comes to sepsis, detecting the causative organisms and targeting treatment is critical. Think about it as the right drug for the right bug. The data shows that the risk of death can increase by up to 8% for each hour of delayed targeted antimicrobial treatment.
Wow, that's really significant. And so, with that, you guys have produced a really extensive library of clinical data supporting both the clinical and economic value proposition of your method for the detection of sepsis-causing pathogens. Can you describe some of that data or highlight one or two publications for us?
There are hundreds of studies on our sepsis products, both internally and externally generated. One that I'll describe is a meta-analysis analyzing 14 controlled studies, 7 of which were in the US and 7 of which were international, which compared T2 Biosystems products to blood culture-based products. And the results were published in a peer-reviewed medical journal. Those findings were consistent with the majority of the other studies. Compared to blood culture-based products, T2 Biosystems products provided 1, faster time to species identification by 77 hours compared to blood culture-based products. 2, faster time to targeted antimicrobial treatment by 42 hours compared to blood culture-based products. Remember what I said earlier, for every hour of delayed targeted antimicrobial treatment, the risk of death can go up by up to 8%. So 42 hours is substantial. And then finally, reduce length of stay in both the hospital and ICU by approximately 5 days compared to blood culture-based products.
That's quite significant. That's really powerful data. And so, I'm sure you use that when you go to market, but so how do you think about sizing the market for your T2Dx instrument?
First, we think every hospital in the world should have a T2Dx instrument. If we try to put some numbers to this by looking only at the potential for our sepsis products in the United States market, if the 6,500 US hospitals adopted our sepsis products and achieved $200,000 in sepsis test revenue annually, which is our target and which many accounts have already achieved, that's equal to $1.3 billion in annual revenue. And that's assuming we place all of those instruments. That's just the US. Add Europe, Asia, and Latin America, we believe the opportunity is enormous, and we're in the early stages of market penetration.
Wow, that's incredible. Thank you. So when you are in the market right now, do you have any competition? How do you look at the competition? Is this a market share taking exercise that you're going through, or how do you think about it from that perspective?
Good question.
The obvious answer would be that we compete against companies offering diagnostic products that require a blood culture as their clinical specimen. That is, they cannot detect sepsis-causing pathogens directly from blood. Again, we have the first and only FDA-cleared products able to detect sepsis-causing pathogens directly from blood. The less obvious answer is that we compete against empiric use of broad-spectrum antimicrobials. Data shows that empiric use of antimicrobials are only appropriate between 30 and 60% of the time. And here I'd ask a rhetorical question. Who benefits from the use of empiric broad-spectrum antimicrobials?
Yeah. So with that, you said you're early in your penetration of the market. So where does your installed base of instruments sit now in the US and internationally?
At the end of the second quarter of 2023, our total installed base was 180 T2Dx instruments and growing. That was comprised of 100 in the US market and 80 in international markets, predominantly Western Europe, Central Europe, and then a little bit in Southeast Asia.
Okay, great. Significant international and worldwide presence, obviously. So, maybe thinking about your market, like with every hospital being a potential fit for this type of instrument and testing, how do you segment it and maybe think about, are there particular types of hospitals that you're having success with at this point, and what's the strategy around that?
In the US, we have a direct sales force, and they literally target all types of hospitals, including acute care hospitals, critical access hospitals, and academic medical centers, or some people would call teaching hospitals. While we continue to target the top 20 US hospitals, and we've converted several of them to our sepsis products, we've had the most success in hospitals in the 200 to 500 bed size. And that's predominantly because there are less bureaucratic and generally more streamlined decision processes.
Got it. That makes sense. I know there's a lot of stakeholders involved with, the sepsis, the management of sepsis in hospitals. And so maybe that plays into your overall commercial strategy and how that maybe has evolved, to drive further growth. So if you could just give an overview of how you're going to the market with your strategy, that'd be great.
Well, this is a razor blade business model. So not surprisingly, we have two corporate priorities along those lines. The first is to increase the installed base of T2Dx instruments globally. And the second is to expand sepsis testing. That includes increasing our sepsis test utilization in existing accounts. As a reminder, in 2022, we achieved record sepsis-driven instruments and record sepsis test panel sales. And during the second quarter of 2023, our most recent reported quarter, we achieved record demand for our sepsis test panels, and we also received the second largest sepsis-driven instrument order in company history. That was our distributor that covers many countries in Central Europe, and this was specifically for instruments to be placed in hospitals throughout Poland. In the US, our team is focused on increasing sepsis test utilization in existing hospital accounts and driving adoption of our sepsis products in new accounts. Internationally, of course, we leverage the relationships with our distributors to expand the use of our sepsis products in key geographies. And as we've talked in the past, we anticipate continuing to expand our international geographic presence.
Great, thanks for that. Makes a lot of sense. So it seems like on the macro level, there's significant discussion around sepsis and antibiotic resistance management initiatives being rolled out across healthcare, like the CDC's recently released hospital and sepsis program core elements. How are these impacting the conversations with customers?
To a great extent. First of all, antimicrobial resistance, or AMR, is one of the greatest threats to humanity. And the inappropriate use of antimicrobials is, of course, a contributor to AMR. Sepsis is the leading killer in US hospitals. It's the leading cost of US hospitalization, and it's the leading cause of 30-day US hospital readmission. Current testing protocols are based on the empiric use of broad spectrum antimicrobials and decades-old blood culture, which has two major misgivings. The first is that it can take days to get a positive blood culture, and blood culture is notoriously insensitive. A single blood culture has sensitivity of approximately 60%, and the consequence of that is oftentimes positives are missed because of the poor sensitivity of blood culture. So when we talked earlier about the competition, and on the one hand, we're competing against blood culture-based molecular diagnostics, those platforms are only as good as their clinical specimen, and blood culture itself is a poor clinical specimen by most standards. Back to your question about CDC, I think it's great to see CDC taking a lead by releasing the hospital sepsis core program elements. It's aimed at optimizing hospital sepsis programs. We've also seen Sepsis Alliance, the nation's leading sepsis organization, taking a front row seat in terms of driving awareness of sepsis. These things and others, we believe, provide a gateway to the adoption of our sepsis products in US hospitals.
Great, thank you. Now, if we could transition, I'd like to ask about some of the steps you've taken to improve operations recently, and particularly on the supply side, where you stand with your production volumes as it relates to the back order you had at the end of the second quarter.
Well, as we discussed in our Q2 earnings call, we ended the second quarter with a back order of approximately $350,000. That included our T2 Candida and our T2 Bacteria panel, and to a lesser extent, our T2 Resistance panel. We've made significant changes that we expect to address and resolve the back order, including hiring a new vice president of operations, improvements to the controls around our manufacturing capabilities, the advanced purchase to a great degree of new critical raw materials, and finally, the engagement of a consultant who has significant experience manufacturing our products. We continue to have strong demand for our sepsis test panels from hospitals around the globe, and we expect to resolve the back order to meet current and future customer and distributor demand for our products.
Excellent. Great to hear. Now, let's transition again into your product pipeline, and I know you had significant news on that front this week. So let's touch on that first. On Tuesday, you announced the FDA clearance of the T2 BioThreat panel. Can you describe the potential for that product?
The T2 BioThreat panel is the first and only FDA-cleared multi-target biothreat product developed and manufactured by a US-owned company. And it's the first and only FDA-cleared product able to detect the 6 pathogens that cause anthrax, tularemia, glanders, melioidosis, plague, and typhus. We believe the clinical performance of the T2 Biothreat Panel is unparalleled. The positive percent agreement, or sensitivity as is often called, for the targets at 1 to 3 times the limit of detection was 100% for all targets except fluorescence, which was 94.3%. And the negative percent agreement, or often called specificity, for all 6 targets in healthy and febrile blood containing no bacteria was 100%. We think this is unparalleled. We don't believe that there's anything like it in the world, and there is certainly nothing like it developed and manufactured by a US-owned company. These are dangerous pathogens with mortality rates as high as 90%. So rapid detection and targeted treatment are essential to improve patient outcomes and save lives. We developed the T2 Biothreat Panel in collaboration with the US government, or BARDA, and we've shifted our focus to commercialization now that we have the FDA clearance under our belt, and we intend to sell the T2 Biothreat Panel to commercial markets and governments.
Congratulations again. That product has shown, excellent performance, and it sounds like that could be transformative, like some of the other products in your pipeline. So maybe just give us an overview on the other products that you're working on developing.
Well, Trip, we've been focused on 5 new products intended to expand the menu on our FDA-cleared T2Dx instrument. That's the instrument, of course, that we talked about before, where our installed base is approximately 180 instruments and growing. So these product extensions or test menu expansions are designed to leverage that growing installed base of instruments. We believe focusing on these products provides the best potential for near-term revenue growth and the most effective R&D investment. Of course, as we just discussed, the T2 Biothreat Panel has now been cleared by the FDA, so we have 4 additional new products to get over the goal line. First, we plan to add Acinetobacter baumannii, which is the 10th most common bacterial pathogen found in intensive care units, and it has a crude ICU mortality rate up to 43%. We plan to add that to our FDA-cleared T2 Bacteria Panel, which will increase the detection capabilities of the T2 Bacteria Panel to approximately 74% of all sepsis-causing bacterial infections commonly found in blood culture. So when we go into a hospital and we ask to look at their positive blood culture results, and we map that against the 5, or it will be 6 pathogens that we detect on our T2 Bacteria Panel, those 6 pathogens cover approximately 74% of the blood culture positives for bacterial infection. So we chose the right pathogens. They are providing broad coverage of bacterial infections. They are generally resistant to empiric broad-spectrum antimicrobials, and of course, they lead to the longest hospital stays and the worst patient outcomes. As far as Acinetobacter baumannii, we've already completed the development, and we believe we have sufficient data to file an FDA submission for 510(k) clearance, which we plan to file in the second half of 2023. And just as a reminder, Acinetobacter baumannii is already on our CE-marked version of the T2 Bacteria Panel, which we sell in certain international markets. The 3 additional products in our pipeline, including the T2 Resistance Panel, the Candida auris test, and the T2 Lyme Panel, have all already received FDA Breakthrough Device designation, which will provide for a prioritized FDA review process once we submit those products to the FDA. We've already completed the development of the T2 Resistance Panel and advanced the US clinical trial, including patient enrollment. And we plan to file the FDA 510(k) submission after completing additional internal testing, including stability testing. Again, as a reminder, the T2 Resistance Panel is CE marked, and we currently market and sell the product in certain international markets. And then finally, while we've made progress regarding the development of the Candida auris test and the T2 Lyme Panel, these products require additional investments. Now, I've seen the reports suggesting, wrongly, that a new diagnostic product costs $50 million to develop. While that may be accurate for an entirely new platform, including a new instrument and test, that is not, and I repeat, not the case for an individual test development. Depending on the test and the clinical trial that's required, typical menu expansion programs cost somewhere in the range of $5 to $10 million. That includes feasibility, development, clinical trial, validation, verification, and FDA submission. So that's what's ahead of us on T2 Lyme and Candida auris test.
Great. That's obviously a significant opportunity to drive some scale and leverage with your menu expansion initiative. So we're all excited about those. Let's make sure we hit on a couple more items on the business before we conclude here. I'd love to hear about the activity you've taken recently and some of the initiatives to strengthen the company's balance sheet.
We've made significant progress to strengthen our balance sheet and extend our cash runway. In recent months, we have increased our cash balance, reduced our debt, reduced our operating expenses, and reduced our headcount. We ended the second quarter with $16.1 million in cash, and we raised another $17.1 million in the third quarter through our ATM facility. Our lender, CRG, converted 20% of our loan balance to equity. That was $10 million, which lowered our debt, increased our market cap, and will lower our future quarterly interest payments. And then finally, we reduced our workforce by approximately 30% in June of 2023, ending the second quarter with approximately 100 employees. If you contrast that back to the beginning of 2022, we had almost twice that number of employees. That also will expect to reduce our future operating expenses.
Makes sense. Thanks. Significant advancements on all fronts on the balance sheet. All right. Just one more before we conclude here. I want to ask what you think investors might be missing about the T2 Biosystems story, and any other concluding remarks you want to make, John.
I think investors understand that we have revolutionary technology, that no other company has FDA-cleared products able to detect sepsis-causing pathogens directly from blood, and that is a significant advantage. I think investors know that we have multiple FDA-cleared products, including the T2Dx instrument, the T2 bacteria panel, the T2 Candida panel, and now the T2 Biothreat panel. I think investors know that 3 of the 4 products in our pipeline already have FDA breakthrough device designation, which is important because it'll provide for a prioritized review once we make those submissions to the agency. I think investors now understand that we plan to file the FDA 510(k) submission to add Acinetobacter baumannii to our T2 bacteria panel in the second half of 2023, and file the FDA 510(k) submission for the T2 resistance panel upon completion of additional internal testing. Investors obviously know that we've strengthened our balance sheet, reduced our debt, reduced our headcount, and reduced our operating expenses. I think investors also understand that not everyone wants us to succeed. Our success may dampen the use of blood culture-based diagnostics, as well as the empiric use of broad-spectrum antimicrobials. And finally, I think investors are smart enough to rely on our corporate filings with the SEC and not be influenced by articles that may contain dated, misleading, or incorrect information.
Ooh, shots fired.
Thank you, John. This is a really exciting update from the company. Congratulations on all the progress, and thank you so much again for participating in the conference today.
Thank you, Trip. I really appreciate it. Have a great day, everyone.
Please like and sub for the Algos fam. I appreciate y'all.